Hello, good people, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History. Welcome to the dojo. And in the last several episodes, we've been in the dojo with Kong Ree and with Wayne Carmen, as Elvis has earned his 7th degree black belt. And today, we're going to hear more from Wayne, and we're going to hear more from Kong Ree, and we're going to hear from Elvis himself. But before we get there, we're going to listen to the song that's all about the crucible that Elvis went through to become a warrior. Crucible of a Warrior. Hey, Gunn, thank you so much for being here.
Still flame, hammer in hand, carved out his name. 16 and airborne boots in the dirt, jumping through walls, unbaptized and hurt. Karate in Japan, fists like steel, champion of honor, deadly and real. Sensei, a warrior's no room for doubt. You wear the G or you train and come back. Your eyes a crucible, baby, not a showbiz belt. You bleed, you break, you feel a warrior's spell. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roll. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. 30 throws, not dances, a fight. Bones to set, boards shattered on sight. Shudo elbow, fingertip flame. Every strike a prayer, every KO name. 6 weeks of fire, no cameras, no fame. Just sweat and bruises, no one played tame. Saw came in, fist like a stone, said put him down, break ribs if it's known. It's a crucible, baby, not a velvet crown. You fall, you crawl, but you don't stay down. Elvis hit the map, but he rose with the raw. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior, forged in Hank's domain. All eyes watched the king that day. Would he crumble or would he stay? But Hank saw it, war in his eyes. Not a quitter, but a fighter who rise. From Hollywood lights to dojo dust, Elvis earned it not on fame but trust. No stunt, no script, just grit and bruise. Black belt truth, not a headline rule. It's a crucible, baby, not a stage or set. You earn every inch, every beat of sweat. Elvis hit the map, but he rolls with a roar. Sneer in his soul, ready for war. It's burning, burning, burning through the pain. Crucible of a warrior. They burned through the fire, broke through the fear. The dojo legends and kings stood clear. Crucible of a warrior. Elvis was here.
Thank you for gathering here at Hillbilly Cat History, where we remember together and listen for the echoes. And today we're listening to the echoes of being welcomed to the dojo. And we start with an echo from Elvis himself. And Elvis, in an August 1974 live performance on stage, made a comment about karate. And Elvis said, "There are a lot of people who know that I have been involved in the art of karate for some time. Kung Fu and karate are the same thing. There's no difference. It's just the Chinese terminology is Kung Fu and Japanese is karate. Kara meaning open, K means hand. Karate. See, I've been doing this for 16 years. I started when I was in the Army in 1959. I've been doing it every day of my life ever since, for at least 2 or 6 hours a day. Elvis tells us himself he's been doing this for 16 years, 2 to 6 hours a day. Now, we've heard other people talk about Elvis practicing and that they sparred with him. People like Red, people like Sonny, people in the inner circle. And yet, I don't think we've ever heard that he was doing this at least 2 hours a day. And sometimes as much as 6. So he was extremely dedicated, if we could take him at his word, to the sport of karate. And Wayne Carman says, as a martial artist, Red was as tough and rough as they come. Personally, I can attest to that. He could take a punch as well as give one. So, Red West, who we can see in this picture, got red hair. That's why they call him Red. He's got a red beard. And Elvis is striking him in the throat in this picture, which is from the movie or the footage that they shot for the movie The New Gladiators, which was a film project that Elvis, it was really Elvis's film project. He participated in it, is kind of the way that they say it, but it was really his film project. He put up, I think, all the money for it. Interestingly, the footage all ended up with Wayne Carman. So I'm not really sure how all that happened, but Wayne ended up with the footage. And this is a still from that, and you can see Elvis striking Red in the throat. Now, Red West had joined Elvis in 1955 when he began driving Elvis to all across the southern United States, because that's where Elvis's shows were. So they spent a lot of time in Texas, spent a lot of time in Arkansas, in Tennessee, in Georgia, in Mississippi, in Alabama, all those kind of areas. They went further than that, but a lot of it was concentrated right in there. Louisiana. Red actually went to high school with Elvis. Same high school, Humes High, but Red is 1 year younger than Elvis. So when Elvis was a senior, Red was a junior. And Gunn is saying, and Marion are both asking about the 2 to 6 hours. It's a lot. Was it even possible touring? I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. I think maybe so, if we look at it in a certain way. And Gunn says, did Red have a name? Like a given name, I assume is what you're asking. And yes, it was Bobby. He was Bobby West. But everybody called him Red. Sonny, his cousin, Sonny West. Well, Sonny was, and it's Sonny, like you're my son, Sonny, like you're a young man. So it's not Sonny, Sunny, which would be, bright like the sun. Sonny had a name like he was a small child, Sonny. Although he was a very large individual. So it's kind of like calling in Robin Hood Little John. Little John wasn't little. That was the whole point of the name. I'm not sure how Sonny got his name, but as a grown man, that's how it kind of fit him. He was anything but a boy. So his real name was Delbert. So I think we can understand why Sonny often went with the nickname Sonny. But Reds, I think, was more given to him. Like Bobby was a fine name, but because he had the red hair, everyone called him Red, and there was no getting away from that. So I think he just leaned into it. But again, I don't really know how they got their names, just how I kind of think they did. And Marion says that she absolutely believes that that Elvis might have practiced 2 to 6 hours a day, because with his stage moves, he needs a lot of muscles. And Marion says, does Red have a karate name, like an animal? I don't know. That's a good question. Great question. Maybe we can find out somehow. I have not seen an animal name for Red mentioned. I'm sure he has one. Now I'm wondering what Sonny's name is as well. I have a note that Elvis once wrote Sonny about karate. It's about striking, but it was about karate. But I don't think he had a name on there. And Gunn says Marion did not think of his stage moves. So in order to pull those stage moves off, obviously he did have to practice them. I don't know that he was practicing 2 to 6 hours a day. The stories from the individuals who were with him, even while he was in the hotel in Las Vegas, the International and the Hilton, when they described his day, it would not appear to have time in it for karate practice. That doesn't mean he didn't do the karate practice. It just means that whoever, when they wrote these books and they notated what they thought he was doing during the day, either they're not around or they don't see him, or maybe he's doing it all alone. Because there are periods where Elvis is alone in his room, and I believe people think that he is reading, but perhaps he's not reading during that entire period. Maybe he's doing karate moves. I do think they practiced a little bit of karate every day during certain periods when he was really into it. And I know that before he would go on stage in order to perform, he would participate in some physical rituals to try to... I think he had a very high energy level at that moment in time. And so in some ways he was agitated. And he was burning off this excess energy before he went out onto the stage, or he was ramping up his energy level to where it would need to be on the stage. And one thing he used to do was what they would call Indian wrestling, which I guess now you should call Native American wrestling. But you would stand with your foot against the other person's foot, side facing each other. And then you would grip one arm. You would each grip the opposite hand of the other, like your right hands together. And then you would try to knock each other off balance without actually moving your feet. And whoever ended up moving their feet, that's the one that lost. So he would do that a lot with Jerry Schilling remembers that. But there's a couple of other people that remember doing that with him as well. But he had a couple of other rituals he would throw in there from time to time, or at different periods he would prefer. But I think those were somewhat, they weren't directly karate, but I think some of what he was doing was some of the karate practice moves. And what we're actually seeing here is Elvis using a 2-finger strike to the throat. And that this move is utilized to cut off the air of an attacker. Because when an attacker cannot breathe, they cannot attack. they stop immediately what they're doing and they begin to concentrate 100% on catching their breath. And Gunn's asking if he was ever alone in his room. He did spend periods alone in his room, or at least separated from those who are telling the stories. Now, there may have been somebody else in there in the room with him, but they're not telling the story of what happened in the room. And Marion says that she tried the Suspicious Minds moves, and they are tough. And singing it at the same time is nearly impossible. So that's a good testament to what Elvis was actually doing on stage. He would often describe his stage performances as equal to, like 6 or 8 hours of very tough physical labor, because it was all a very physical performance shoved into less than an hour. Now, I've always felt that that was somewhat of a stretch for him to be saying. I think it was very physical. He was using that somewhat as an excuse not to gather other exercise or to be able to eat what he wanted. He would say this when people would say, hey, maybe you shouldn't eat that. So I believe some of that was an excuse, but I believe there's definitely truth in it. And that truth was brought out by the guys to him originally. They would say, we can't understand how you're doing so much exercise out there. And that became part of the legend and the myth, even to Elvis. I think it grew within his own mind to where he had a myth internally of how much exercise he was doing while he was on the stage. It was a lot. But I don't think it was as much as he sometimes portrayed it to be. But he would come off sweat-soaked. He was definitely sweating out buckets and buckets of water every day. So he did need to maintain a high level of hydration. And he also had an issue with his throat because it's very dry in Las Vegas. So no matter how much water he drank, his throat would be extremely dry, and it was very, very difficult to sing or talk for anybody, especially for a long period. And they still deal with that today. Most of it's dealt with by the air conditioning, but the air conditioning itself, if you don't have humidifiers and stuff, creates another problem. And Wayne Carman says, of the many black belts I've trained with, Red is the only one. Well, let me say this again. I've already messed it up. Wayne Carman, black belt himself, says, of the many black belts I've trained with, Red is one of only a few I would trust to cover my back in a street fight. I believe what Wayne is telling us here is that Red knows more than just the forms of karate. He knows how to keep his cool and to keep his head in a street fight. And he's tough, and he doesn't stop. So he's going to last till the end of the street fight. And he's got the situational awareness to understand where the dangers are at in a street fight, which is far different from practice in a dojo. This is a good observation on Wayne's part, because Red has been in many, many, many fights. Red loves to brawl. And so by the point you see this picture, Red has beat up a lot of people. And he's taken a lot of physical blows in return. He doesn't get away with all that scot-free. But he's a fighter. And he likes to fight. When they were in Germany, Red would go down to the local bar. Vernon would only hand out a very small amount of money as pocket change for Red and Lamar, who were living in Germany with Elvis, but were not employed at the time. Nobody was employed because Elvis was not technically employed in his own profession anymore, and therefore didn't have the payroll to pay anybody. At least that was what was said, and everybody was taken off of the payroll, except for like the Graceland staff. They're still running the house, waiting for Elvis to come back. Necessary personnel, obviously there. Everybody who was unnecessary has been let go, and these two have decided they wanted to go with Elvis to Germany, but they're not taking any pay. They're just there because they love Elvis. But Red would go down to the local German bar with his little bit of money, and every time he would get into a fight, until the bar owners finally asked Vernon to stop letting Red come down to the bars, as if Vernon had any control over Red. Because Vernon also liked to visit those bars, right? And so did Lamar. They would go down there and hang out and have a few beers. And it became difficult for them because Red got into so many fights. And Red and Elvis, prior to Elvis going into the army, and prior to Elvis hooking up with the colonel, they dated a lot of women together. And many times, those women in those towns already had boyfriends. And those boyfriends would come after them on those dates. And Red and Elvis would get into fisticuffs with those guys. So Red been around the block many times in terms of trading punches with people. And Gunn says, isn't it dangerous to put the hand against the throat, not being able to breathe? That's exactly the point of the move, Gunn. And that's what he's trying to do. And Red is a tough enough individual to spar with him and allow him to demonstrate this. And he trusts Elvis enough to do it. And Marion says Red's eyes don't look good. Is it drugs or alcohol? So that's a good question. We can see that his eyes are definitely, they're somewhat puffed out or sunk in, as you might describe it differently. The eyeballs themselves look to be pushed out, but the sockets appear to be sunk in. And he's got a lot of dark circles there. The bags under his eyes are very pronounced. So Red would have been in his late 30s in this picture. I would say probably like 37, 38, maybe as old as 40. So he's a relatively young man in the picture. He might have an immense lack of sleep. There is no air conditioning within this dojo, and the effect of the heat plus the exercise, I believe, makes your face appear this way, especially in the pictures. I'm not sure that accounts for the eyes as much, but there's definitely an effect from the heat inside the dojo. And we've got to remember that, because when we look at Elvis's face in the same pictures, we would have to use the same criteria to make these judgments. But is it possible he's using amphetamines or other drugs in this picture? Highly possible. Can't really say. From the book Elvis What Happened, there's an implication that while Elvis is doing these drugs, Red, Sonny, and Dave are not. But I don't think they ever come out and say that they're not. But unlike Marty, they don't really indicate what they did or if they had any issues. So I think it's a fair question anytime you see these pictures to ask that. But I can't answer. I really don't know. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. Glad to see you here. And Marion agrees that it's dangerous to use this move. In this picture, we can see Elvis and Master Ree, and the man in between them, that's Wayne Carman. That's the other black belt that's commenting in today's stories. And Gunn says that Red looked dizzy in that last picture. Yeah, he might have. He might have looked a little dizzy there. And I don't know where in the cycle of the demonstration that picture is taken, so maybe they've been holding that pose for a moment and Red had not been able to breathe, because that's the point of the move. So maybe he was getting dizzy. I don't know. That's a good point. Now, in this picture, we can see that Elvis is again striking Red. This is part of a demonstration. Red gets to be the karate dummy in this case. He's taking all the blows, although he is acting as an aggressor. So he's coming in throwing blows, but Elvis is showing the correct defenses or possible defenses. So it's Red that's taking all the punishment, if there is any punishment within the demonstration. Hopefully Elvis is pulling these punches enough, or these strikes, that they're not truly hurting Red, but this is a strike to the eyes. And this move is potentially damaging because it can lead to permanent loss of eyesight. So if Elvis were to misjudge this, it would be more dangerous than the throat strike. They could probably get Red breathing again, but if he damages his eye, they're not going to be able to fix that. So this is a move that's only recommended if you're defending yourself against a life-threatening attack, typically by someone who is a complete stranger, because you are possibly going to inflict permanent, lifelong damage on this individual. But if that's a stranger who's attacking you, they're probably looking to give you some permanent damage, so that'd be okay. But if you're just sparring with someone, like Elvis is here, have to be very careful. And Marion says that their movie fights always looked real to her. And that's another good point, Marion. The skills that these two have developed in karate, specifically in Kenpo karate, which is the type that Ed Parker teaches. So even while Elvis is at Kong Ree's learning from Master Ree, he's already been involved with Ed Parker for a long time. And he's taken a lot of lessons from Ed Parker. That's where Dave Hebler came from. Dave was teaching karate at one of Ed's schools. Elvis met him, and then Elvis hired him. That was earlier in the 1970s. Elvis met Ed in 1960. I believe they began to do some training together, but I think it really took off more in the later 60s, especially as Elvis started to go back to the stage. But prior to that, like Elvis is saying, he's practicing 2 to 6 hours a day. So I think part of that could have been done on the sets. They talked about, people do talk a lot about the karate demonstrations that Elvis would give to people on set. Like all the boys would be sitting around, they're waiting for, the filming game is a lot of waiting. You're waiting for the lights to be set up, or the camera to get situated, or the set department to finish making something, whatever it is. A lot of times you got to kill. You have a lot of time to kill. So Elvis and the guys would do these karate demonstrations. Well, I'm sure that counts as part of the practice hours that Elvis is talking about. So he might have practiced an hour or two just demonstrating to people on the set some days. And they did this so much, and he did this with some of the other guys, that on film, the Kenpo karate lends itself to throwing blows that do not strike a person, but on film, they look as if they did. And then it's sold with the sound effect and the reaction of the person that's supposedly being hit. And Red was very good at throwing himself around as if he'd been hit. So a lot of that is not just the way that Elvis throws the punch, but it's the way that Red reacts to being hit that makes you believe this was a real fight. I think John Wayne was pretty good at this in his movies too, but he didn't know any karate, so they were doing it slightly different. But the idea is the same. The camera is two-dimensional, and you fight in 3 dimensions, so you don't touch each other. But on camera, it appears to be 2-dimensional. And an interviewer once asked Kong Ree, he says, I know you've made the statement several times that you learned as much from Elvis as he learned from you. And Master Ree said, that's right. That's absolutely right. So this 2 to 6 hours a day that Elvis practices, it's apparent to Kong Ree because he's learning things from Elvis. And a lot of what Kong Ree learns from Elvis is about generosity, about treating other people, you know, as you would want to be treated yourself, or perhaps better. Of what gifts mean when they're given between people. But also, it is karate style. Elvis is bringing things to the table that, although Master Ree is a master of karate, he specializes in a specific form. And so some of these things that Elvis is bringing to him, they're new to him, and he hasn't seen them before, and now he's able to add them into his repertoire and to mold them into his form of karate. And like Master Ree's already told us, he's learning and improving his own technique every day. And that's part of what Elvis is doing with him. Now, we've seen this picture before. It's the group of people on this day that Elvis earned his 7th degree black belt. And Elvis is sitting with his legs closed because he's ripped his pants. And there's an embarrassing hole in them. And he doesn't want that to show up on this camera. Elvis is also wearing socks because he has an injured toe. He had an ingrown toenail and had surgery for it the day before, or 2 days before. Elvis also has an injured hand that you can see in this picture. It was apparently scratched by the diamond on a fan's ring when they clutched his hand during a performance. And it has become infected. So Elvis's body is visibly, to us, in a weakened state. We also know at this moment in time, his insides are suffering immensely. That at this point in 1974, he's moving into a period where his internal pain is probably going to grow, multiply immensely over the next few years, because his megacolon is certainly already started, and his heart is probably enlarged at this point, and that's causing his liver to enlarge, and that's very painful. That can create a lot of pain. So in this picture, I believe Elvis is sick, and we can see an outward sign of that, maybe 2 outward signs. His body's fighting off this infection, but it's also fighting at a much deeper level that no one understands, and no one's going to understand. And I believe he's seeking health through the practice of karate. And maybe that's one of the reasons it's become more important to him, again, at this point in his life, and why he's come to Master Ree. because they do talk about health together. And Master Ree is a big believer in karate and diet and living healthy. And he believes that this lifestyle will lead to a healthy lifestyle. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be enough for the issues that Elvis has. But he's very happy in this picture. And he's at a moment when he is gathering the fruits of a great accomplishment. He's graduating to 7th belt, 7th degree black belt. And when he has this honor, these are the people who surround him. And Gunn is asking, so Elvis was better than Ree in a way? Like, would Elvis win a karate fight with Master Ree? I'm going to say no. I don't think that Elvis's mastery of his techniques were as great as Master Ree's or Ed Parker's or Hank Slomansky. Maybe not even Wayne Carman. But that's because they have dedicated their entire lives, not 2 to 6 hours a day, but their entire lives to karate. But Elvis's knowledge of karate, his know-how, his ability to pull out multiple different moves, his ability to incorporate the moves into the stage shows, his ability to incorporate the moves into the stage costumes, that's extremely impressive to Master Ree. That Elvis is using the karate in ways which Master Ree never has, that Master Ree has thought about, that he's experimented with some, because he loves design as well. And if you got a chance to see the Spa Guy's latest episode about Master Ree at the dojo, where he shows some of Master Ree's collection, you can see that Master Ree had a love of all these different artistic forms, and that he was very skilled in them. But Elvis brought them all together in a brand new way that I think was very exciting to Master Ree. And Gunn says it's so sad for Elvis that she can almost feel his pain. And Marion says that she agrees that he was already sick and he had to take meds. For example, his eyes hurt because of the glaucoma. Yes, at this point in time, I think he's already a very sick man. And yet, in these demonstrations, he looks very healthy. In a very real way, he is fighting his way through it. Literally fighting his way through it. In this picture, we can see that Elvis is employing the claw technique. He grabs a hold of the attacker's neck and attempts to diminish his opponent's ability to breathe. So this is somewhat like the strike to the throat that he demonstrated with Red. I think that causes a spasm in your throat and you're unable to breathe. This is a move that requires a lot more sheer power. You could probably get pretty lucky with that strike. It wouldn't need a lot of power with that 2-finger strike if you hit the right spot. But if you're going to grab a man's throat and squeeze it shut, that requires a massive amount of power in your hands, in the vice grip between your thumbs and your fingers. Now, we know that Elvis had very strong hands because he had intentionally worked them out And he did a lot of the board breaking and breaking other stuff with his hands. So his hands were tough in all respects. That was, I think, something that drew him to the karate. He liked the power in his hands. Now, Wayne says that every time he saw Elvis sparring, he says, every time I saw Elvis sparring, it was always with Red. You got to really be able to trust the person that you spar with. Now, in this picture, Elvis is doing this demonstration, and that's not Red. We can only see the man's hair at the corner of his shoulder, so we don't know who it is, but we can tell it's not Red. But this isn't sparring. This is a demonstration. In sparring, you're actually throwing the moves. You are going to strike the sparring opponent. You're not going to strike them full force. So you're limiting yourself somewhat during the sparring, but there's a good chance of damage. And so you have to really trust the person that you're sparring with, that they have enough control to make the sparring safe. So the most dangerous sparring is always with the amateurs, the new people to karate, the ones who do not have a black belt, because they're liable to do anything, and they won't have any control over where their blows land. At the same time, they won't have any technique, so their blows may not do much damage. But they're the most dangerous. In this picture, we can see Elvis, Kong Ree, and Wayne Carman, as well as two other individuals from the class. Elvis is leading them through a meditation. And in this specific meditation, he's talking about the number 7 and 7 days of the week and other things that the number 7 applies. 7 colors of the rainbow. How Elvis sees these all as linked. The number 7 is very special to Elvis. But for today's purposes, for this talk, I think what's important for us to see is that Elvis is meditating. And that we talked yesterday that meditating isn't a thing that we normally associate with Elvis. It's not in the stories. No one's talking about Elvis was meditating for 20 hours a day or anything like that. It's like virtually not mentioned at all. But here we can see that he is meditating, and Wayne was very impressed with the meditation that Elvis led. I don't believe this is the only time Elvis ever led them all in meditation or participated in a meditation with the group. I believe he probably meditated on his own. And again, if he's in Las Vegas, in his suite, in a room away from others, maybe there's one person with him, maybe there's nobody, and he meditates, I believe he would count that as hours of karate practice. This is part of karate. It's not physical practice, but it is mental practice. And so he may be including his meditation as part of his 2 to 6 hours per day when he does that calculation. So he could be including time that he's demonstrating karate for others in groups. We also have stories that he did that in his suite and in the dressing room at the Hilton, the International, after his shows, when he would have a lot of people there. So maybe that was part of his practice. I mean, he was obviously a very busy individual. So I don't think he would have had 2-hour blocks in which to practice. That seems far-fetched. But finding 2 hours throughout the day to have gotten some karate in. That seems reasonable. 6 hours, that's a lot, but there were some days when he wasn't working, so he had a lot of days off. Now, in this picture, Red is striking Elvis in the stomach. He's punching him very hard in the stomach. And for demonstration purposes, Elvis would tighten up his stomach muscles, and he would take repeated blows from his workout partner, which would demonstrate his ability to take punches as well as deliver them. So Red is punching Elvis with force, and Elvis is taking that blow in his stomach and not responding to it. I find this to be incredibly interesting because it means he had some extremely strong stomach muscles in order to provide that kind of protection. And we know at this moment in time, his colon is enlarged, his heart is probably enlarged, and his liver is probably enlarged. And there's like a membrane that goes around the liver, and when it stretches, it's very, very painful. And so my belief is, as Red's hitting him, he would have these other internal pains going on. And yet he's still able to absorb these blows from Red with no apparent outward sign. And it makes me wonder how painful these were for him, and how incredibly healthy and strong his stomach muscles were, while at the same time his organs were having a very difficult time. And Marion says that, well, we read that one, that he had the glaucoma. And Gunn says that he's fighting his way through it, probably hoped to feel better doing karate, more healthy. And maybe it did help him feel more healthy for a time. And Marion agrees that the karate definitely gave him physical and mental strength. And Marion also points out that the meditation may have helped him with his stage fright, which that's a good point. He did suffer from stage fright through his entire life. That was part of the anxiety or the agitation that he would try to work out prior to stepping out onto the stage. And so that stage fright, it would grow exponentially with each step towards the stage until he was actually out onto it. So that was something that he suffered with throughout his life. Just never could get over the stage fright, and yet got over it every single time he went out to perform. Now, Wayne Carman says Elvis just couldn't grab any sparring partner and risk injury to his face or throat. We didn't use protective equipment in those days, so the slightest error in judgment could have resulted in broken noses and toothless smiles. Elvis with a broken tooth or a broken nose, that would have been a serious hit to his career. May have healed and no one would have noticed after a while, but broken nose usually is noticeable the rest of your life. So this was it was a real danger. And it's possible you could walk into a place like Kong Ree's, who Master Ree knows most of his students, but really he's teaching anybody who can make it to the class and make the payments. You know, unless Mr. Ree just cannot stand that particular person for some reason, and that would ban them, but I'm unaware that Master Ree ever did that. So it's there's a potential that somebody could have come into this class specifically to fight Elvis, to get a chance to spar with him, to hit him in the face. So Elvis has to he's got to keep that kind of thing in mind all the time. Got to choose the right sparring partner, always chooses Red. And Wayne says Elvis trusted Red. He knew Red wouldn't go overboard and take cheap shots. Although Red, apparently here in this picture, he didn't mind giving him a good shot to the solar plexus. He's a little low for the solar plexus, but right into the gut. In this picture, we see Elvis and Master Ree and a beautiful young lady who I believe is also Korean. And I don't know this for sure. I can only identify Elvis and Kong Ree because I recognize them. I think that is Kong Ree's wife. Now, I have seen her in a video from a decade or more later. And of course, she's not wearing a G in the video I see her in. And she's only appears for a moment. But I think this is her. So you can see that his wife was a very beautiful woman. Or whoever this is that Elvis has his arm around, but I'm pretty sure this is Kong Ree's wife. And Gunn saying a danger also hitting his stomach. Did anyone know about his colon? No one ever knew about his colon. No one knew about his colon until the autopsy. And that's when they realized this had been a major problem for him for a long, long time. No one knew that any of his organs were enlarged until the autopsy. There was no imaging back then that would have let anyone know this. Now, some people will say that there was imaging back then, and it's true. The imaging technology that we use today, like CAT scans and MRIs and those were in their infancy, and even prior to their infancy in the 1970s. So they were highly experimental. Now, could a man of Elvis's means have gotten to an experimental technology? Yeah, of course it could. But the doctors, you have to have a doctor that goes along with you on this journey. Okay, so in Elvis's case, he would have needed an internal specialist that was willing and able to use the imaging to understand what was happening in Elvis's body. Now, the first problem is the imaging was crude. So it was very difficult to read any of the imaging. The other part is that the MRIs were only being used for brain scans. It was a neurological instrument. And the brain guys loved it. Like, they were loving it, and they were learning how to read these images. And it's really their work that now allows us the benefits of MRI is a very, we can all get to an MRI now. It's expensive, but everyone can now access an MRI, and there are specialists in reading it, and doctors know what it means. The other problem was, even if they had imaged him and known any of it, they didn't have any techniques. They didn't have any surgical techniques that would have fixed any of his issues at the time. Even now, they don't have any surgical techniques that are going to fix an enlarged heart or liver. They could potentially replace your heart with an artificial heart. The liver's a whole different story. Now, there are there are medical workarounds for the colon. You know, and these are different kinds of ostomies, where basically you take the colon out of a person, and the waste management is all now handled through plastic bags and holes in the person's abdomen or elsewhere. So it is possible to live without a colon now. It was slightly possible back then. The colon surgeries had been happening for a long time, but the risk of infection had always really cut down on their efficacy. You might make it through the surgery, and the surgery might be successful, but you would eventually die of an infection that you picked up in the surgery. Nowadays, they've conquered a lot of that. But yes, was it dangerous to be striking him in the stomach, and was it probably leading to more pain for him and maybe even more injury? I would have to say yes. Probably not a great idea for him. And Gunn says that he was suffering alone, and he really was, because even though Dr. Nick was listen to him and understand that he did have this pain, Dr. Nick could not identify where the pain was coming from. They had some good ideas. Like Dr. Nick had prescribed a drug, trisorolin. Well, that's the wrong drug. He had prescribed a drug that was specifically for treating coronary artery disease. And he did not know that Elvis had that because there was no test for it. Basically, you treated it based on symptoms that people told you they had, which was pain in the chest. So they started treating Elvis with this drug a few months before he died. And that indicates that Nick was taking this very seriously. And he understood that the pains Elvis was describing could be heart-related. But they had no way to know for sure. Now, once the autopsy happened, Dr. Nick was proven correct. That is what Elvis had, was coronary artery disease. And so it's very possible the drug that he gave him was helping him, at least with the heart issues. Now, you might say died of a heart attack in the end, so maybe that didn't help him, but I think that has a lot to do with the toxins that were flowing through his body because his colon was so stretched that it could no longer maintain integrity and keep all of the microtoxins within the colon. And once that happens, you start to have all kinds of ancillary side effects, including thought processes that are messed up. It causes mood swings, massive mood swings. And we've heard about that in Elvis's last year, even before. So I think that might have been leading to, but especially in that last year, especially in those last months. So he definitely was a sick individual. And I think he did find some comfort in the karate and in good friends like Mr. and Mrs. Ree here. So keep paying attention to the posts that I'm putting out, because you'll get a chance to see that video with Mrs. Ree in it. And she's very adorable. And you don't want to miss that. So hopefully you've been paying attention to the posts I've been putting out recently. And in today's, you got to hear directly from Master Ree. And in yesterday's, you got to hear from Bill Superfoot Wallace. So we're moving into a martial arts karate moment in the post. For a little while, I'll be throwing up some karate stuff to help us get deeper in to Elvis's love for karate. But we've again reached the very end of another episode, and I'm going to send you guys out of here on another song. And this is the song that he gave away his heart. And Gunn says that she hates when people call Elvis a drug addict. I do believe he was dependent on drugs at the end, medically dependent, somewhat physically dependent. But that's what medical drugs are for. They're treating something that we have to treat. And so we're dependent on that drug to treat that specific ailment. And that, in the last couple of years of Elvis's life, had a lot more to do with drugs. And he wasn't an addict because he wasn't willing to sacrifice his honor or his family or his karate or his music for the drugs. And we know that, according to him, the three most important things in his life: family, music, karate. And to each of us, he gave away his heart.
Midnight lights, rhinestone fire, Arabian suit, burning with desire. He hit the stage like thunder rolls. Vegas shook and the story unfold. Charlie's birthday, crowd went wild. He cracked a joke, then sang with style. But just before he sang Hurt So Deep, he stopped the show and made us weep. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belong. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. Black in hair, the man stepped near. Elvis smiled, the crowd could hear. Thanks to you, we raised the light. 17,000 hearts took flight. Then back behind the velvet door, he gave away a little more. Music ring, a boxcar shine, a suit that held his sacred time. He gave away his heart, not just a song, diamonds and gold, where the love belongs. Rings and shades from the man backstage. He healed the broken, he lit the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I saw it all that night. He didn't need applause to know his worth. He gave away his soul in Vegas mirth. Not just a king, but something more. A man who knew what hearts were for. Gave away his heart, not just a soul. Pieces of love where the brave belong. Ritual gifts from the man backstage. He saved the hurting, he the flame. Oh, he gave away his heart, and I'll never be the same. I was there, I saw the rings, I saw the light. Gave away his heart.